Welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast, the show that invites you to take a seat around the community fire and listen to stories that inspire. I'm your host, Kathy Robinson, author, coach, and founder of Athena Wellness, a company that's dedicated to supporting you on your journey to live more wholeheartedly. Hello, and welcome to episode 27. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm so excited to share today's episode on creativity as a wellness practice. But before I do, a milestone was reached last week with the release of episode 25 of the Athena Wellness Podcast. And I wanted to pause for a moment and thank you for trusting me with your time and for coming along on this journey. Your emails and feedback have been invaluable and so appreciated. Here's my biggest takeaway from what you've shared with me. You like the mix of stories and practical, actionable advice over a broad range of topics. So that will be my guidepost for the next 25 episodes, and then we'll check in again and see how we're doing together. Sound good? So now on to the show. The last 8 episodes were all related to traditional wellness topics, specifically vitality in the form of nutrition, exercise, and rest. These are important and foundational topics, but I believe that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to holistic well-being. In my book, The Athena Principles, Simple Wellness Practices for Overworked Professionals, I introduced a tool called the Holistic Wellness Spectrum that I created as part of the wellness methodology that I share. The spectrum is a broad wellness inventory that can help determine where to focus your wellness efforts. It's a way of finding new entry points and to deepen the journey. What's interesting is the activities related to exercise, nutrition, and rest only make up a third of the wellness activities on the spectrum. The remaining activities relate to flow, including ideas for simplifying life routines and living creatively and intuitively and with purpose, as well as connection, and that includes reflection and contemplative practices, as well as connecting in our relationships and with our community. And I'll put a link to my website where you can download a free copy of the spectrum, along with other free book resources. And so as I scan this spectrum, aside from good food, enjoyable movement, and deep rest, what impacts my wellness the most is creative living. And that's what we'll be discussing today. And if you're thinking you don't have time for creativity or you're not a creative person, let me share this. What we're discussing today is not about frivolous activity. It's about the beauty and richness of life. It's about what lights you up. It's the good stuff. And it's the deep stuff. I don't think it's a stretch to say that I've learned more about myself through my relationship with creativity than any other life experience. That said, my creativity took a back seat to my career and my life for decades. And through the years, I gradually added more and more creative time and activities to my days, until I finally built a life that I find creative and inspiring. And along with this way of living came a new network of creative and inspiring friends and colleagues that was slowly built along the way. And just like wellness, creativity is a process. What makes you feel creative is personal to you. So here's what we'll be talking about today. As always, we'll start with the basics. What is creativity? You may be surprised where you can find it and how you can hone it. Next, we'll explore the positive correlation between creativity and wellness, as well as the impact of suppressing creative expression. And most importantly, how to incorporate creativity into your busy days, ways to cultivate a creative, inspiring life. So I invite you to sit back, take a nice long breath to ground yourself in presence, and let's get started. I had a blue-collar, New Jersey upbringing where creativity was appreciated in others, but not considered a smart career choice. So I kept anything that ventured from what was considered air quotes, practical, hidden away. In fact, the first person who told me I was creative was my college roommate, and that was because she saw both sides, the ambitious business student by day and the budding artist who headed to New York City with my camera on the weekends, taking abstract black and white photos of the grit in the underbelly of the city I loved. She saw the beginnings of expression in the changes I was making, in the music I listened to, the way I dressed, how I decorated my space, the art classes I took, and how I yearned to live my life. She witnessed a young woman finding her own path in a confusing yet unlimited world. And I'm thankful that I, at that young age, did not know that I would be living that duality for decades. That there would be the buttoned-up type A Wall Streeter by day, counterbalanced by the guitar player, band member, mixtape maker, zine writer, van road trippin' alter ego that served as life support through the daily commutes and mind-numbing days spent in cubicles and conference rooms. So the first thing I want to share about creativity is that it's a lifeline. It's what kept me alive and hopeful and optimistic while I navigated the life I created that was full of obligation and expectation. Creativity was a lifeline to the part of myself that could breathe, that felt true, like when I struck a chord on the electric guitar when my fingers were pressing the strings against the frets just right, that feeling of reverberation in my chest. That's the lifeline, that feeling of true resonance. It was like changing from a starched shirt and suit into ripped jeans and Doc Martens when I got home from work. Keep in mind, this was the 1980s and 1990s. A more traditional definition of creativity that I like a lot is from Cal State's website. It reads, creativity is defined as the tendency to generate or recognize ideas, alternatives, or possibilities that may be useful in solving problems, communicating with others, and entertainment. The more formal dictionary version is the ability to transcend traditional ideas, rules, patterns, or relationships to create meaningful, new ideas, forms, methods, or interpretations. What I love about those definitions is they transcend the struggling artist and exude imaginative problem solving. And what I found as I moved away from those earliest stifling days of my career where creativity was something I hid, the more I creatively played, the better I was getting at my day job. Isn't that curious? My creative pursuits gave me the opportunity to practice skills that were beyond the work I was doing, exploring unusual methods, connecting the dots, recognizing patterns, critical thinking, creating a unique point of view, working a problem from all sides. And as these two worlds continue to merge, my corporate work got a lot more interesting. In fact, the last 5 years or so of corporate life was like a lab. When I was preparing presentations for the board, I approached it like a story, which was something I loved. Same thing when I was presenting at conferences. I would imagine speaking in front of an audience like the one I was about to address, but wearing jeans instead of a suit and talking about topics I was passionate about. And that's how I began to imagine how I might incorporate the things I loved into the work I did. That kind of thinking infused new levels of energy into my corporate presentations, and I had fun creating them. So let me close this section with 2 thoughts. The first is to drop the belief that you're either creative or not. I hope you can see from these examples that creativity is a skill that can be practiced and honed. The second is, no matter where you find yourself in life, you can bring creativity into your days. I understand that, in general, our society, including the business world, thrives on systems and processes that can be easily replicated to meet objectives. I get that. And in many instances, having the space to imagine another way of doing things may not be valued up front. But I know what will be valued. If you take initiative and show how a new approach can have a positive impact, that's the way to navigate the business tension between the way it's always been done and here's a new way of doing it. Regardless of whether or not your new creative idea gets traction, it will make your days more fun and gratifying while laying the foundation for creative living. Now let's talk about the wellness benefits of living a creative life and what happens when creativity gets stifled. There have been numerous studies conducted on the benefits of creative expression, and they agree on the physical and mental benefits, which usually include things like reduced stress, elevated mood, decreased anxiety, lower blood pressure, reduced risk of chronic illness, and a strengthened immune system. Two studies in particular are most often cited. The first is from 2010 and was published in the American Journal of Public Health, and it shows the direct link between creative arts and healing, leading to some positive physical and mental health outcomes like the ones I just named. The second was published in 2014 and showed the positive impact of activities like musical training on neuroplasticity and cognitive ability. And I'll put links to both of those in the show notes. The takeaway is that incorporating creative expression into your life is an important part of a healthy, holistic lifestyle. Having creative outlets allows us to express what we're feeling and connect with the forgotten parts of ourselves. That is, who we are at our deepest levels. Even if the activities are done in private with no one seeing the output, a creative practice can lead to more enjoyment and deeper meaning and life purpose. The very act of expressing can function as a release valve, and the resulting optimism it brings can increase our ability to problem solve and see challenges as opportunities, as another study on optimism and well-being has shown. That reframe is important as you find ways to prioritize creative activities, to see creative living as a way to recharge and refuel, a way to connect with yourself and with others, a way to discover new possibilities. It's been my experience that when I trust my creative capabilities, I'm more likely to step out of my comfort zone because I know that any air quote mistakes are really opportunities for learning, and I also know that I'll feel rejuvenated as a result of doing that. And this trust builds over time. There's a quote from a yogi master I love, and he said, "I exist in perpetual creative response to whatever is present." The more you trust your creative abilities, the more you'll understand your own system of self-belief and self-reliance. Living in creative response is not difficult, but it does need a fertile environment in the form of downtime and ongoing tending. The good news is you don't need large chunks of time to develop your creative sparks, but you do need consistency, as with any other habit you're trying to create. And when you take brief, unplugged breaks from the busyness of life, you can enjoy the feeling of being in liminal space. The Latin origin of the word liminal means threshold, a place of transition where you've left something behind, but you haven't quite arrived at the new destination. It's a place between the present and the future. It's a place of not knowing, and it's from this place that creativity thrives. And I think that's why creative expression isn't automatically included in our wellness efforts. It's not a lifestyle or a product or a way to look. It's a way to be. When young children play, it comes from a place of curiosity. Everything is stimulating as they creatively make sense of their emerging world. And as adults, we can complicate creative expression to the point of stifling or blocking it altogether. We've all heard the stories of tortured artists. The image of a bandaged Van Gogh comes to mind, or any number of artists whose well-being was negatively impacted by addiction. The takeaway here is that there's a darker side to this when creativity is suppressed by obligation or expectation. There's a heaviness that takes form when we don't value our creativity. But even if we choose to ignore it, it doesn't go away. Poet David Whyte talks about this smoldering creative energy in his poem Out on the Ocean, where he warns, if creative energy remains unlit, the body fills with dense smoke. This unseen, buried energy will make itself known. There's a 1990s Dar Williams lyric on hidden passion, and it comes to mind here. She says, "Way back where I come from, we never mean to bother. We don't like to make our passions other people's concern, and we walk through the world of safe people. And at night, we walk into our houses and burn." Just let that line take hold. To avoid burning up, let me offer this. Don't overcomplicate it. Creativity is not black or white, right or wrong, follow the rules or break the rules. It's a huge playground where everything and everyone is welcomed. It's a place of enjoyment and curiosity. It's a place where you can spend 5 minutes or 5 days. You get to choose. Here's how I think of creativity. It's a way of filtering life experience. One of my grandmother's creative expressions was through cooking. Her signature dish was macaroni with red gravy made with simple ingredients. She made it every Sunday. But no one could make it like her. Her daughters would buy the ingredients at the same stores, go home and make the sauce, and it would taste like their sauce, not their mother's. I once made a pot of sauce with her standing by my side in her kitchen. It wasn't the same. And that's because we couldn't replicate her life experience and the love she was expressing for us through her delicious creations. Think of all the musicians who use the same 8 notes or the same basic chords and how different the music sounds. Or if you've ever been part of a writing circle, how everyone hears the same prompt but goes off and writes in different directions and creates such unique pieces. So creativity isn't something you need to do. It's how you bring your life experience into your days. I hope this gives you a sense of freedom to explore and to allow yourself to come through whatever it is that you choose to create. Now let's talk about how to incorporate creativity into our busy days. There are 3 ways that encourage a creative mindset and spirit that I'd like to talk about. The first is be curious, and that sets the stage. The second is stay open, to cast a wide net of interests. And the third is about making connections, to generate creative response. Let's take a look at each one in more depth. So the first is be curious. Curiosity has been called the key to creativity because it's like starting with a clean slate, or as the Zen monks would call it, beginner's mind. It's the willingness to suspend your beliefs, your opinions, your assumptions. It's coming from a place of questioning instead of one of knowing. So to encourage this mindset, it's instrumental to create a space in the day where you don't have to be productive, even if it's for a few minutes at a time. And it doesn't have to be a physical space. Throughout my career, that space for me was my notebook. But I also used my commute time to and from New York City to observe, write, or just daydream and watch my mind as it wandered. My recommendation to invite curiosity is to create a space for yourself, either a physical one like a creative space or a workshop, or a portable one like your car or, as I did all those years ago, your commute. You get to set the parameters. How often and how long you'll spend there and what you'll do in that space is up to you. I suggest including an activity that's meditative or repetitive in some way to keep your logical left brain occupied while your creative right brain gets to play. Something that invites an active mental state of exploration and expansion. Some ideas that I can think of include creating a collage of words and images, building a model, doing a jigsaw puzzle, using a photo app to create a new image from a picture you've taken. If you play a musical instrument, that's great, or just daydreaming, visualizing, or journaling. Anything that briefly takes you out of your responsibilities. Learning to access and spend time in that liminal space will pay dividends as your creative practices deepen. The second is about staying open. Since creativity is born out of new connections, I believe in casting a wide net when exploring new ideas, because how you combine and infuse them later, that's going to be your uniqueness. What's attracting your attention now? It could be music, lyrics, poems, books. You should see how I write in the margins of my books. Documentaries, photos, art, podcasts. I look at scientific journals, blogs. I spend a lot of time in nature. I love looking at food and new experiences, relationships, current events. It's all fodder for creative play. And as you explore, be on the lookout for new ideas, interesting concepts, unusual experiences, and diversions. And I did a back of the napkin list of ways that you might invite new possibilities into your days just by trying new things. Things like taking a new route to a familiar place, learning a new skill, visiting a museum, gallery, or historic site, crossing something off your bucket list, volunteering, trying a new meal or food, learning about the night sky, learning how to write a poem or start a business, walking along the ocean, driving out to the desert or mountains, backpacking, designing something, collaborating, creating a series of self-portraits, or having a constructive conversation on a complex topic. Anything that invites new learning can lead to new insights, as can observing a situation or using questions to learn more. I love open-ended questions. They invite dialogue. Questions like, how else can we do this? Is there a different angle? What's the backstory? Tell me more about this. What are differing points of view? Or simply, what if? The third is about making connections. That's how you learn to have a creative response when something arises. A creative life is an authentic one. It's a life filled with self-expression, trust in your instincts, and in your capabilities to be able to problem solve, along with the permission to take risks and to try new things. Overall life satisfaction and quality improves when we live in creative response. Once you have a practice of gathering ideas that intrigue you, the fun part comes in putting these ideas to good use by combining them and making new connections for yourself and others. You might choose to keep this creative output private, and you can work with recurring themes and imagery and symbolism, things that resonate with your own life story. Or you might choose to share it with a small group or the world, and that fuels innovation. I found that there are two helpful ways to invite connection. The first is a well-known brainstorming technique based on the acronym SCAMPER, and you can use that to play with an idea by running it through this simple model. The S stands for substitute. What part of this process or idea can be replaced? C is combine. How can two or more components be combined? A is adapt. How else can you adjust the existing idea? M is for modify. What changes can you make to get better results? P is put to another use. How could this idea solve other problems? E is eliminate. What would happen if you removed at least one component? And R is reverse. How can you rearrange the current status or workflow? An example of using the P in this model, the put to another use, would be the discipline of biomimicry. And this is an area that I just find fascinating. It's the study and the mimicking of nature to create new products or processes. For example, Velcro, the hook and loop fastener, that was invented by an engineer who was curious about how the burrs that stuck to his pants and his dog's fur. And out of that question came this ability to fasten other things using a similar technique. The second way to invite connection is to give the creative endeavor or the problem some space. For example, when I'm generating ideas for new podcast episodes, I find that a morning of preparation can act like an incubation period. It's a place where eureka moments can happen. I'll shift to a mindless activity like walking or hiking or driving, and it's like being in a little creative lab, and the connections almost make themselves when I least expect it. And don't you just love when you get those aha moments and they just seem to come out of nowhere? That's creativity as a wellness practice. That's a boost to well-being through enjoyment. That's connecting with your true nature. And when you do, the world brightens. I'd like to leave you with a quote from Georgia O'Keeffe. She says, "Whether you succeed or not is irrelevant. There's no such thing. Making your unknown known is the important thing." I hope you'll consider making creativity part of your wellness plan so you can be well by filling your creative well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know there are many ways you can spend your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with me. Until our paths cross again, be kind to yourself and show your warrior spirit some love. If you know anyone who could benefit from today's episode, please pass it on. And many thanks for supporting the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It means a lot and it helps others find their way to our circle. If you'd like to access the show notes, have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode, or would like a transcript of this episode, visit www.athenawellness.com/podcast. Until next time, be well.